I visited my boss's wife. She said to me, "Why don't you stay a little longer?" Lucas, a young employee in a small German town, leads a dull and ordinary life. For 8 years, he has worked under Mr. Miller, a strict boss who tolerates no mistakes. But on one ordinary day, Miller asks him to escort his wife, Anna, back home. Just a small favor for Lucas, he thinks. When Anna opens the door, she seems surprisingly warm, her smile unusually open. A glance, a touch, and Lucas feels that this evening is about to change. What began as an innocent walk turns into a game of emotions, secrets, and dangerous temptations. I remember the precise moment when Mr. Miller called me into his office. He was, as always, abrupt, curt, and without questions. "My wife Anna needs a ride. She's waiting downstairs. Take her home." "No, please. No, thank you. Just an order." I nodded, though my stomach tightened with unease. I had never spent time alone with Anna before. I only knew her from brief encounters in the hallways, a polite smile, a nod, nothing more. As I stepped outside the building, I stopped by the car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, and watched her approach. Anna emerged. The blonde in a dark dress looked nothing like the distant, authoritative woman I had imagined. Her steps were light, almost youthful. She smiled as she climbed into the car, a sincere, warm smile. "Thank you for the ride," she said softly. The drive began in silence. I kept my eyes on the road, hesitant to speak, but she turned toward me, studied my profile, and suddenly asked, "Lucas, isn't it? How long have you been working for my husband?" I paused, then nodded. 8 years. She sighed softly. 8 years. That's a long time. Her gaze seemed thoughtful, almost sad, and in that moment I felt this ride would change far more than my evening routine. The first minutes in the car were filled only with the hum of the engine and my scattered thoughts. I wanted to appear professional, to avoid mistakes. Then Anna began to talk. At first, she spoke of trivial things, the weather, the traffic, the town, but suddenly her tone shifted. "You know, everyone thinks I have the perfect life, but in truth I spend most of my time alone." She looked out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your boss, my husband, hardly notices me." Her honesty startled me. I had expected a distant woman, not someone who would open up to me. I struggled to find words, managing only a clumsy, "I'm sorry." She gave a faint smile, as if she had expected such a response. Sometimes I wonder if I even know what happiness is. We stopped at a red light, and for a moment I looked at her. Her eyes seemed tired, yet there was a spark behind them, strange, familiar. My heart pounded as I glanced quickly at the street. Suddenly she tilted her head slightly and her voice flared again. "Tell me, do you miss the good old days? When life was simpler?" I laughed nervously. "Yes, sometimes." She nodded and smiled with a sly air. "He's going on a business trip next week. We could do something, go to the cinema, take a walk, maybe have a picnic." Her words hit me like a punch. "You mean just the two of us?" I asked, hesitantly. Anna nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Just one day." No one needs to know I stayed silent. My instincts screamed to refuse, but another part of me, the part hungry for the unexpected, wanted to say yes. And then I finally heard myself whisper, "All right. But it will be our secret." Nearly 2 weeks passed, and I still had no news from Anna. I convinced myself her suggestion had been nothing but a joke, a spontaneous whim. Yet deep inside, that wave of curiosity and danger lingered. Then one afternoon, while Mr. Miller was away on business, my phone buzzed, a message from her. "So, have you decided?" It read. My heart tightened. I stared at the screen for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. "Ignore," reply. Finally, almost against my will, I typed, "Maybe it's time to find out." No sooner had I sent it than guilt gnawed at me. What had I done? But another message appeared. The meeting place, the time, and a small heart emoji. An hour later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of her car. This time, Anna wore a light blouse and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. She seemed younger, more relaxed. "Ready?" she asked, with a smile that made my knees weak. Our first stop was the cinema. The film was mediocre, a comedy neither of us enjoyed, but that wasn't the point. We laughed louder than the scenes deserved. We exchanged furtive glances in the dark. Then we wandered the streets, sipping coffee like old friends. Finally, it happened in the park. We walked side by side, talking about childhood dreams, old memories, those little things one never tells anyone. And then, without warning, Anna took my hand. My heart tightened. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Her fingers were warm, firm, and suddenly the world seemed brighter. We found a bench overlooking the city. The sun was slowly disappearing on the horizon, a golden light spreading across the rooftops. Anna stayed silent, then said softly, "Everyone thinks money brings happiness, but what good is it if you're alone?" She turned toward me, her eyes filled with desire. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and her lips touched mine. Gently, almost hesitantly, but undeniably. I knew I was crossing a line, and yet I returned her kiss. For a few seconds, it felt like we were the only two people in the world, far from rules, obligations, and consequences. Pulling away, she whispered, "This will remain our secret." And I knew it was only the beginning. The days that followed that kiss passed in a haze. At work, I acted as if nothing had happened, but, in my mind, I relived that moment on the park bench again and again. Anna's smile, the pressure of her hand, that tender kiss. Everything felt dangerously real, and yet it remained our secret. An invisible tension grew between us, intensifying as we pretended not to see each other. One evening, as I sat in my apartment with the television on, the doorbell rang. It was late. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door hesitantly, and there she was, Anna. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red from tears, a suitcase in each hand. "I left him," she said without greeting me, her voice firm but full of emotion. I was speechless. "You what?" "I couldn't take it anymore," she continued, stepping inside and setting down her suitcases. "That empty house, the fake smiles, the endless nights alone. I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be that woman reduced to her role." I ran a hand through my hair, my heart pounding. "Anna, you know what this means. Your husband is my boss. He won't find out right away. And even if he does, I won't go back." She looked at me, vulnerable yet determined. Part of me wanted to push her away immediately, to set boundaries, to save myself. But I couldn't. So I stepped aside. "Come in." From that moment, everything changed. Anna stayed. Those stolen hours became a daily routine. I came home from work and she was there, in my kitchen, on my couch, a book in her hand. She cooked, laughed, spoke of things she hadn't done in years. We took evening walks as if we were a couple with nothing to hide. But the closer we grew, the heavier the pressure inside me became. Every day at the office was torture. I saw Mr. Miller bent over his papers, imperious and cold, and I knew that behind his back, I was living with his wife. Sometimes I thought he would notice, summon me to his office and put an end to it all, but it never happened. On the contrary, he seemed even more absent. He never spoke of Anna, never asked anyone about her, as if he had forgotten she existed, and that made me furious. After years of marriage, he didn't care where she disappeared to. She had been right. To him, she was nothing more than a trophy, a piece of furniture. One evening, I came home early. Anna was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She turned, smiling, her face warm and familiar. At that instant, I understood. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep working for Miller while living with his wife. I walked up behind her, slipped my arm around her waist and whispered, "I've decided. I'm quitting." She turned, eyes wide. You… What, Lucas? Your job? I don't need him. I only need us. There was a moment of silence. Then a smile lit up her gentle, radiant face. She pressed her forehead against my chest. Then we're free. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The decision to leave my job was easier than I had imagined. Mr. Miller received the news with indifference. He asked no questions, made no attempt to change my mind. He shrugged, as if I were just another number on his long list of replaceable employees. "As you wish," he muttered before returning to his papers. At that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. When I came home that evening, Anna was already waiting. She sat on the couch, legs crossed, a glass of wine in her hand. When I told her I had resigned, her eyes widened, then a warm, relieved smile spread across her face. "You really did it?" she murmured, almost in disbelief. I nodded and sat down beside her. "We're free, Anna." The weeks that followed felt like a new life. No office, no orders, no endless games of hide and seek. We lived openly, at least within the four walls of my apartment. In the mornings we woke up side by side. She made the coffee, I set the table. We went shopping like any couple no one would question. In the evenings we strolled through the streets, hand in hand, laughing at trivial things. Yet even as I savoured this newfound closeness, I felt the weight of the shadows Anna had brought with her. Sometimes at night she would lie beside me awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, her breath uneven. When I asked, she brushed it off. "Just thoughts," she would say. But I could sense her inner turmoil. One evening, as we returned from a walk, she suddenly broke down in tears on the couch. "I'm afraid, Lucas," she sobbed. "Not because I regret leaving, but because I don't know what will happen to us. I left everything behind, and sometimes I wonder if I'm asking too much of you." I took her hands and held them tightly. "You're not a burden, Anna. Thanks to you, I finally feel alive." She lifted her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, but managed a faint smile. "Then I must never look back." And indeed, we began to make plans for the future. Nothing serious, nothing binding, just dreams, a small apartment together, maybe a trip somewhere no one knew us. I felt something growing between us, something more than a fleeting affair. But deep inside her, a gnawing question remained. Was this truly a new beginning, or just an illusion that could collapse at any moment if the past caught up with us? In those silent moments, when Anna fell asleep beside me and the city roared outside, I stared into the darkness and realized we were walking on thin ice. One wrong step, and everything would shatter beneath our feet. Our life settled into a routine. Anna and I developed habits that made us feel like a real couple. We made coffee in the mornings, took evening walks, and sometimes even went on picnics. Everything seemed normal, and yet not quite. Behind every smile lingered an unspoken question. How long could this really last? Mr. Miller never mentioned Anna, not at work, not before I left, not after. It was as if he had erased her from his life. That made things easier, but it was also unsettling. Could a man like him truly be so indifferent? Or was he secretly plotting something we couldn't even imagine? Anna seemed determined to push that thought away. She threw herself into this new life as if it were a liberation. She renovated my apartment, added plants, hung paintings. "It feels like home now," she said proudly one evening. I smiled, but something inside me stung. Was it really our home, or just a temporary refuge? Sometimes when she laughed, free, like a young girl finding her place for the first time, I was overwhelmed by a happiness I had never known before. But there were also other moments. Moments when she stood silently by the window, a cigarette in hand, her gaze lost in the distance. In those moments, she seemed distant, unreachable. One night, I woke to find her side of the bed empty. I found her in the kitchen, wearing her robe, a half-empty bottle of wine in her hand. "Anna?" I asked cautiously. She turned to me, her eyes shining. Sometimes I wonder if I could burden you with my chaos. If one day you wake up and realize I've pulled you into my storm. I stepped closer, took the glass from her hand. We got into this together, so we'll get through it together. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Then promise me you won't leave." "I'm not going anywhere." It was easy to say those words, but they burned inside me. I wanted to hold her tight, to protect her. But at the same time, I knew I had lost control long ago. We were living a life built on lies. It was easy to say those words, but they burned inside me. I wanted to hold her tight, to protect her. But at the same time, I knew I had lost control long ago. We were living a life built on lies. A few days later, during one of our walks, Anna suddenly stopped. "Lucas, we can't go on like this forever. We need a plan, a real one." She spoke of moving away, of starting over in another city. No one needs to come looking for us. We can be free. I looked at her, her eyes full of hope. Part of me wanted to agree immediately, but another part hesitated. My family was here, my friends, my whole life, everything I would have to leave behind. Was I ready? "Give me time," I murmured. Anna nodded, but I caught a fleeting glimmer of disappointment in her eyes. She wanted me to leap without hesitation, but I needed solid ground beneath my feet. That night I couldn't sleep. I felt our love was genuine, but at the same time, it was a ticking time bomb. Sooner or later, something would happen that would change everything. I just didn't know whether it would come from us or from someone else. It was a Sunday evening when the truth finally caught up with us. We were sitting on the balcony, a bottle of wine between us, the city lights sparkling below. Anna leaned against me and whispered, "Maybe this will really work for us. A new beginning, just you and me." Her words were sweet, full of longing, but she had barely finished when the doorbell rang downstairs. Loud, insistent. I froze. No one ever came unannounced, especially at that hour. Anna looked at me, her face pale. "Him," she breathed. My heart pounded. I stood and walked to the door. Through the frosted glass I saw a tall, broad silhouette, motionless. When I opened the door, he was there, Mr. Miller. No suit this time, but the same cold, hard stare. "So here you are," he growled, in a low, threatening voice. My mouth went dry. Behind me, I heard Anna catch her breath. "Anna, let's go," he ordered sharply. But she stepped closer to me, crossed her arms over her chest and lifted her chin in defiance. "No, I won't go back." His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he would lose control. Then he let out a bitter laugh. "Then stay. Do you really think you'll find with him the happiness you never had with me?" His words cut through me like knives. I wanted to answer, but Anna was quicker. "Yes," she said firmly, "because he sees me." He listened to me. There was silence. Miller looked at us, then shook his head, as if resigned to the inevitable. "Then it's over," he murmured. Without another word, he turned and left. The door slammed, leaving behind an almost unbearable silence. Anna trembled. I took her hand, feeling how cold it was. "It's over," I whispered, more to myself than to her. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Not entirely. A man like Miller never forgets, never forgives. Yet that night, only one thing mattered, that she was there, by my side. We held each other tightly, as if to shut out the world. Maybe tomorrow would bring chaos, maybe everything would collapse. But in that moment, on that small balcony above the city, we were free. Free in our choices, our risks, our love. And for the first time since the beginning of this story, I was no longer afraid.